Andrew Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hello and welcome to the COB. I'm Andrew Gagan. Great we can have your company as we get across this Monday, and what a session it has been. 1.3% on the CBO 200. Looks as though we're going to finish at that level, which is pretty much the session highs. And we have seen that on positivity on Asian markets. S&P 500 futures last time I checked were up about 0.7%. This is all off the back of that news flow out of the Middle East, with both Iran and US pausing hostilities, at least for now, potentially of course, to come up with some sort of peace deal. We've been here before, but the market's still liking what they hear. Well, let's get to the themes of the day. Conflict cools, well, that's certainly the case at the moment after, well, the US has essentially spent the past 2 weeks hitting Iran hard with its military strikes, and Iran returning in kind its own hits on US bases across the Middle East. Myer markdown. Look, its sales are up, but it's have been heavily discounting, and as a result, its shares are down substantially today. And chip and charge, this is all to do with a CXMT in China has debuted, and shares are up about 500%. We'll get to that in a moment with our special guest, David Scutts. Let's first, though, take a look at what's going on across the sectors. Tech, one of those sectors doing very well today, has been under pressure, of course. WiseTech leading the charge there, along with Zero Life 360. Elsewhere, gold, another very positive sector, once again has also been under pressure, but we've seen that Middle East trade unwind essentially, with gold up, energy down. Let's go there, in fact. And the top energy producers there feeling the pain today. Karoon down more than 8%. You're just getting across the top news stories of the day then. In the gold space, Evolution agreeing to acquire Carnaby Resources for $213 million, adding the Greater Duchess copper gold project, which could produce 10,000 tonnes of copper a year. Perpetual, EQT has raised its takeover proposal for the funds manager there at $22.50 a share. That's up 2% on the previous bid. Lynas Rare Earth signing a $29 million partnership with South Korea's LS Eco Energy to develop a rare earth facility in Vietnam. Santos exporting its first 300,000 barrel condensate cargo from the Barossa gas project as Darwin LNG ramps up towards full production. And as I mentioned there earlier, Myer sales rose 11% to $4.09 billion following the apparel brand's acquisition, but comparable sales grew just 0.7%. There's heavier discounting amid weaker consumer spending, squeezed margins. Back in the resources space, Capricorn Metals lifting its gold reserves by 33% to 5.24 million ounces. And Electro-Optic Systems raising its FY26 core revenue guidance to between $280 and $300 million, with first half revenue expected to jump 284%. So let's unpack what we're seeing on markets. Obviously, with that geopolitical backdrop, David Scott joining us from StoneX. Scotty, welcome back to you. The taco trade, it's back. We've been here before, but the markets are buying it.
G'day, Andrew. Great to be back. And yes, it wouldn't be a Monday morning in Asia without some kind of de-escalatory headlines coming out, including this time from the US and from Iran. So clearly going into the weekend, markets are positioned for some form of escalation. That's what all the mail reports are coming out. Axios is reporting that Trump was considering a major attack. And then, of course, after 13 nights of hostilities on both sides, both came out with some much more palatable language. And we're off to the races. So not really a surprise to see the reaction today. We've seen this so many times before, particularly when markets have been wrong-footed. It's the way they're positioned. So cyclicals outperform, Europe outperforms, Japan outperforms. And you look at some of the riskier assets out there, also seeing a bit of a pop back, gold, crypto, things like the Aussie dollar as well. So we've seen it before, but the playbook remains the same.
All right, so given that then, what are you seeing in the oil market? What's that telling you at the moment?
Yeah, obviously oil and part of this jigsaw puzzle. So We've seen today's performance. I suspect that Europe will continue to roll with it into later this evening. Now, what I'm watching now more closely, though, is how the price action responds, because we see lots of different headlines and lots of different changing and chopping and changing around. But it's the actual price action that I think is much more informative as to what's actually potentially coming down the path. So this is the Brent crude daily contract. And all I've done is I've just gone and just highlighted with the red dots there, basically where we saw probes of the 50-day moving average back in the early stages of the war. And you saw that during that particular period, any test of that period, despite headlines that were contrary to what the actual prevailing trend were, we saw big bounces. So in the near term, I think the 50-day moving average gives us some sort of sense as to where energy is moving potentially over the next couple of days. We've now come back and we've seen that 50-day moving average has rolled over. We've seen it tested once back late last week and it bounced. Again, we're testing it again. So to me, the price action at that particular level today is going to be really informative. If we see a move back beneath it, it tells me that in the near term at least, the path of least resistance is lower. It probably means an extension of the moves we've seen today so far in Asia.
All right, interesting to see where that goes then, because obviously more recently, markets have been wary about the potential inflationary effects of rising oil prices, in particular as we head into some key central bank meetings, the Fed, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan this week. What should we expect, do you think, from Kevin Walsh and the Fed this week?
Well, this is going to be the interesting question, because last meeting it was all about the dot plot, the SEP, the projections that came out, which really helped go and feed the beast, because of course Kevin Walsh during his press conference was just flat batting away any question in regards to forward guidance, and I'm pretty certain he's going to go and provide the same insight again. He'll go and talk about some of the debate that was going on within the FOMC. But when it comes to what he's going to go and deliver, he's not going to go and be committal one way or another. So unless the Fed stuns us with a rate increase, now it's not out of the realms of possibility. It's about a 1 in 3 chance, and potentially maybe a little bit underpriced in my opinion, given some of the moves we've seen. If we're just going to get the Fed funds rate left unchanged, we're going to probably have to go and lean really heavily on the actual vote split. How many FOMC members voted to go and hike rates? How many voted to go and keep them unchanged? That might be the closest we get to any real information about what the Fed is thinking as we move towards the September meeting.
Well, similarly here with the RBA, Scuddy, just looking at the markets, looking at a 40% chance of a rate hike this coming meeting next month, 100% chance by November. In fact, what we're going to hear from Michelle Bullock tomorrow, what do you think she's likely to say?
Yeah, she's addressing the Annika Foundation luncheon. So this has been historically an event that really can be market moving when it comes to the Australian rates market and how it's perceived to see where the risks are when it comes to interest rates moving forward. The topic is really interesting as well. So she's talking about monetary policy in an era of shocks. And so I just wonder whether we get, of course, Australia's inflation print for Q2 and for June on Wednesday, whether she might try and go and set the scene there as to some of the conditionality behind what that may go and present. What could go and see the RBA go and resume its tightening that we saw earlier this year. So I think it's going to be a really important event. You mentioned what was going on. So late last week, it was around about just under 50% chance of a hike coming through in August as a result of what we've seen with the energy prices over the course of the last few hours. It's now beneath 30%. So we're seeing quite a big retracement of that. Let's see what Michelle Bullock has to go and say tomorrow. Are we reading too much into the tea leaves about knee-jerk reactions in energy markets?
Yeah, all right, fascinating to see what she says, of course, ahead of that CPI read the following day. Scuddy, Wall Street, meanwhile, all eyes will be on some of the hyperscalers this week who are reporting, among them Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, in that ongoing concern about just how much CapEx is being thrown around today. How's sort of market moving are these results likely to be?
Really important because, of course, we've seen a number of those names already report last week. Alphabet, of course, came out increasing CapEx spend, and the market didn't like it one iota. And so I wonder whether there's any clues there as to what some of the other hyperscalers might go and roll out at this point in time, because of all the Mag 7 names, and not so much the picks and shovels like NVIDIA, but of all those who are actually hyperscalers, the one that's really sat out this whole entire AI boom and revolution and build out has been Apple. Now, Siri's obviously not the best product right now, but it has been rewarded. You can see there on the chart, it has absolutely outperformed this year. And so there's probably a message there to some of these hyperscalers that, hey, it's great that you want to go and try and build up this new technology. We all know it's going to be around and probably very influential in the future. But at this point in time, there's probably nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we think there might actually go and be a case to go and slow the pace a little bit. Now, that might go and reward the hyperscalers, but the upstream areas, the chip makers and everything else, they would really suffer the consequences of that. So that's what's on my radar this week when it comes to corporate earnings.
Well, meanwhile, then you take a look at what's going on in China today, Scuddy. A memory chip maker, CXMT debuting. When I looked, shares are up about 500% when they debuted in Shanghai. What's that tell you about the market? Mind you, China's a bit different, isn't it?
Well, it certainly tells you that China has not gone and changed its ways, regardless of what kind of company is listing. If you go back over time, it's really, really unusual to see anything but a really substantial stag profit on day one. But then you go look back, it's not unusual to see lots of hype, lots of excitement around IPOs to do with the AI space. Have a look at SpaceX, of course, in the United States. Not that long ago, it had like a massive gain in the first few days of trading, and then unwound it all. So yes, there's a lot of excitement out there, but memory chips, which is what CXMT specializes in, it's the biggest producer in China, about the fourth biggest overall globally. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be sustained longer term. So keep a close eye on the price action there, but just seeing what's happened today, it's not one surprise, one iota. It's the common course for what we see with IPOs in China.
Scuddy, great to get across what you see in markets. Enjoy your week. Thanks for joining us from StoneX.
You too. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, let's catch up with our stock of the day. It was Electro-Optic Systems, which I mentioned before there, the defence company lifting its 2026 revenue guidance after posting a more than 280% increase in unaudited first half revenue. To get across what they think, we caught up with Gary Glover from Novus Capital and Francesco Destratas from Autonet.
Yeah, look, we like this at Autonet. Look, EOS has transitioned from a turnaround story, I suppose, into a defence growth story. You know, they've always, well, not always, recently stressed that they've got record order books. I think that upgrade sort of reinforces that order book that they have. Our analyst has got a valuation of 11.45 on it, which it might be a bit optimistic, but you know, where the share price is at the moment, I think you know, there's definite upside in it.
Yeah, similar view there. I mean, probably the most interesting thing is their sort of counter drone sort of weapon system there. That's obviously, you know, military budgets around the world have increased. Their obviously drone warfare has increased substantially there. So being able to protect against that sort of drones there is obviously a big growth area. Stock's had a pretty decent pullback as well. Sort of, what have we gone back, $12.50 back to $7 here. So reasonable update today here, you know.
All right, let's catch up with the best and worst in today's trade then, beginning with those in the green. Pretty much all, well, bar one, Electro-Optic Systems, which we were just talking about, but all in the gold space there, led by Capricorn Metals, also off the back of its update today, whereas those that have fallen into the red, as I mentioned, that unwinding of the Middle East trade there with the energy stocks under severe pressure today in both oil, gas and coal. So tonight we get US durable goods orders for June, plus well, among the earnings tonight, US time, AstraZeneca and Welltower. Now ahead tomorrow, as Scuddy was mentioning there, RBA Governor Michelle Bullock is speaking ahead of that key quarterly inflation read on Wednesday. The Bank of Japan's core CPI data is released, and locally we get quarterly updates from Aris Resources, ALS, Alvera Lithium, IGO, Aluka, Liontown Viva and Whitehaven Coal. So let's look at where we're finishing up for the day. 1.3% on the CBO 200, almost 1.4% on the S&P ASX 200, led very much by what we're seeing in the tech and resources sectors. That is the COB. Thanks for watching and listening.